Welcome to Monetize Your Message, where we're helping you develop strategies to build a consistent message and achieve all of your business goals. This episode, we are going to be talking a bit about how you are not the hero of your story when it comes to using your story within your business.
Exactly. So what we're going to be talking about today is instead who is the hero and what is your role if you're not the hero. So for many of us, when we think about who our target audience is, our target audience really is us, but a few steps behind us. And that means that instead of being the hero of our story, we're actually the guide, and they're the hero of the story. Sometimes this may not be the case in your business, but chances are the reason that you are providing the service you are, or the offerings that you're offering, is because you've had experiences, you've learned from them, you've become a content expert, and you're able to guide people through the steps that you've taken, or to help people understand the experiences that you've had and the things that you've learned, whether or not you've directly experienced them or not, so that then they can benefit themselves in their life or their business or whatever it is you're helping them do.
Yeah. And so oftentimes the audience that you're serving, their pain points are your past pain points. And so that is really great because it means you can speak to them really well because you felt them and you experienced them and you went through them and you've come out the other side having gotten rid of them. But it also means that when you're telling your story, it's within the context of what they are experiencing and how you can understand what they're going through. And so we like to think about this. So in a movie kind of perspective, if this were Star Wars, you're not Luke Skywalker. You're not Princess Leia. You are one of the guides. So you are Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda or something like that, where you are helping the main character to achieve their end goal, which in your case, the end goal is, whatever the end result of your service or product offering is. And so you kind of take their hand and lead them through that process as the guide, but they get to have the spotlight on them. So when you're telling stories in your business, putting that spotlight on them, putting it in a context where you are the person who is guiding them through that process, but they get the attention on their pain points and the benefits they want to see in their life or in their business. That is a really important kind of frame to put your stories in so that your audience member doesn't come to you and just see this person who's only talking about their experiences with no context as to how it might connect the two different people.
Exactly. So we're going to dig into 6 different ways that you can embrace your role as Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda with the hairy ears in your storytelling. So the first one would be to figure out what kind of guide you are. There are some guides like, Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda who are very wise and respected. And then, I don't know if you're a Hunger Games fan, but you look at Haymitch, right? He's a mentor. He's a guide, but he's very irreverent. He's poking fun at people all the time. And he has this sort of backhanded way of encouraging people. There's so many different kinds of guides and mentors out there. And that's because there's so many different stripes of heroes, and different heroes need that different kind of rapport. And this is why, even if, you're a life coach and so over here is a life coach, you can both be extremely successful and be attracting tons of people because you have different personalities, and that's going to attract different clients to you. So one of the ways that you can start to figure out what kind of guide that you are is actually going back to our copywriting character quiz. True, this is about how to embrace your voice in your writing, but it really can translate into this. There's 5 different characters. One is the rebel, for instance. So that might be more of the Haymitch kind of character, where you are encouraging people through sort of disruption and new ideas. There's another copywriting character who is the scholar. So you can guide people through giving them knowledge and by teaching them and helping them come to greater understanding. There's 5 different characters. So we definitely encourage you to take the quiz. You can access that by just going to www.northstarmessaging.com and taking the quiz and finding out who your copywriting character is, and that will help you start to embrace your mentorship style.
Yeah, and when you kind of take that character and put it into your storytelling style, it really does service the way that people connect, because some people are going to connect more with a rebel voice. Some are going to connect more with an artist or a nurturer voice. And finding your true voice that you can use to express not just the content of your stories, but the context of it and the way you deliver your stories is some people are going to relate more to one story than another, and one way of telling a story than another. So, Marie's example of two different life coaches, if one life coach is approaching things in a very rebellious way that's very much against the status quo, and that shows in the way that they tell their stories, someone's going to be more attracted to that than maybe the life coach who takes on more of the nurturer role and more of the hand-holding role and more of the, I'm going to be in a very, almost a caretaker role where I am with you on every step of this journey, and I'm going to dig more into maybe different aspects of life coaching or do it in a slightly different way. So it might be a gentler approach than the rebel approach. So really digging into which of the 5 characters you identify with will help you figure out if you are the Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Hagrid of the mentorship roles. Which then leads to the stories that you actually tell. And we touched on this in the last episode, which is telling micro stories from your own experience. So taking the big experiences that you've had and breaking them down into smaller chunks that you can then tell in that voice. So people connect more with small moments than with huge experiences, because huge experiences, there's a lot to take in. Small moments are often universal, and those small moments can serve as, oh yeah, me too moments, which are really powerful when it comes to building a rapport and telling your story and giving the hero kind of the material that they need to see, oh, this is a person who not only is an expert, not only is credible, but also has been there and shares something with me.
Totally. So keeping an eye out for those poignant moments in your stories is absolutely the best way to capitalize on how powerful they can be. The more detail you put in there, honestly, the more you can water down that poignant, memorable experience. So micro stories are absolutely a powerful tool for you. Going back to, this is the third step, the third way for you to embrace your role as a guide. Going back to what Jesse was saying earlier about making sure that the hero gets the spotlight, there's actually a very simple way to do this in terms of your content, whether this is copy or video. And that is by using you language. So even when you're telling your own stories, it can be very powerful. For instance, in your About page, this is a great example of this, because your About page, people go to your About page to learn about you, right? But what if you could sneakily use your About page to also help them discover something about themselves? The more that you're able to incorporate you language in your own personal stories, the more it feels relatable, the more it feels like you're talking with them, having a conversation, and the more it feels like you're aware of the fact that this is about a relationship. This isn't just me standing here on a pedestal talking about myself.
Right. Yeah. And so when you do that you language, you can also incorporate in, and this is the next step, things like questions, making them a part of the conversation instead of just viewing your About page or your content or your emails, your storytelling as, here is a resume, here is a list of the things I've gone through in life. And isn't that great? Don't you connect with me now? But unless you actually frame it in the way where it is about them in some way and where you're asking them questions to see if they're connecting to it, they may not have that point of connection. And you can ask questions in both dynamic and static content. So going back to the About page example, your subheaders could be a series of rhetorical questions. And no, they can't answer you directly. You're not sitting there looking over their shoulder while they read your About page. But when people see a question, they automatically want to answer it. And your mind says, oh yeah, okay, I have an answer to that question, which keeps them engaged and keeps them reading and allows them to insert themselves into the narrative, which is really powerful. You want them to be able to visualize themselves where you were. And the same is true of dynamic content. In fact, it's even better in dynamic content, social media content, blog posts, things where you can actually interact with the reader, because when you ask questions, you can get responses and you can see whether something resonates with someone or not, and which stories may provide the best connection points. And it might surprise you. People might connect with something that you didn't expect them to connect with.
Right. If you guys have been watching our episodes, or if you have been reading our social media posts or emails for a while, you'll notice we pretty much always have a call to action. And a question is like a little micro call to action that you can insert within the text. And it turns out whenever you have content that is really just sort of one-sided and you don't ask for a response from people, people might be reading it, they might be taking it in, but you'll never know because they'll never do the thing that you ask them to do. But if you ask them to reply, if you ask them to respond to a question, if you ask them to book a call, click a link, whatever it is, then yeah, not everyone's going to do it, but some people will. I guarantee hardly anyone's going to if you don't ask them to. So definitely being willing to ask those questions, those rhetorical or dynamic questions throughout. I know we talk about having just one CTA and you could have one big call to action at the end, but just infusing it throughout just gives that sense of dialogue and of conversation of a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also making sure that you use the information that you get from those questions in a way that is really strategic for your business and helps you, think of new stories to tell and think of new ways to connect with people, because it may not always go in the direction you want things to go. You may start telling a story and someone connects with one piece of it that you didn't expect, and that veers things off in a new direction. And that's actually really awesome because they're giving you the feedback that you need to tell the story that they need to hear, which is how you can be a better guide and how you can take them on that journey to where they need to go and how they can achieve what they're trying to achieve. So in doing that and asking those questions and focusing on the you language, you can go to the next step, which is prioritizing stories that are relatable. And the more feedback that you get, the easier it becomes to find those relatable stories and to say, okay, well, this segment of my audience really connected with the fact that, I had this one life experience and this was I got a lot of feedback on it. So can I dig deeper into it? Can I talk more about the lessons I learned there? Can I start a dialogue around it? Or they didn't connect with this, so maybe I'm not going to talk about that as much because it's not something that seems to resonate with my audience at this time. Maybe I'll bring it up later and see if it connects with people more then when they're further along in their journey or something like that.
So what do you do if you don't have that data yet, though? If you don't have that feedback? So things that can be really powerful for resonating with people, for being relatable. Oftentimes, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, it's being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're open to talking about times in your life that were difficult for you, times in your business that were difficult for you, decisions that you made that you were really unsure about or you felt some anxiety around, these moments where you really open up and show your true self and show, no, I'm not a perfect person. No, I've been through this before.
Mm-hmm.
That means you're relatable. If you are, think about somebody who just seems perfect, right? The problem is they don't feel approachable a lot of the time. And there's almost a sort of sense of relief when you discover they do put on their pants the same way you do in the morning, right? Like that they really are a person and that they really do experience a lot of the same anxieties and frustrations as you do. So if you're willing to open that door and be open about the fact that you are human and that you have experienced these sort of vulnerable, difficult moments that a lot of people don't like to open up about, that can absolutely be a way for your audience to connect with you. And maybe they won't share back, but there's so much more likely to want to listen and want to stay engaged and want to hear more about what you have to say if you're willing to pull back that curtain.
Yeah, totally. I remember this time when there was someone I really looked up to in the industry, but I felt intimidated to approach them because it felt as though they were so far ahead of me and inaccessible in that way. And they sent out I think it was a Facebook post that was just about how they had this tendency to skip meals because they were working so much and they got so in the zone. And I was like, oh my God, me too. Like, I never eat and that's a problem, but I'm glad that we share this problem because all of a sudden you became like a million times more approachable because you aren't someone who has all of their shit together all of the time. And for me, that felt like a point where I was like, okay, you are a real human being who has, real struggles that may look like my struggles sometimes. So now I feel like you've opened that door, you've pulled back the curtain a little bit, and I can actually have conversations with you. And it was a stupid small thing. And sometimes it is those stupid small things. And sometimes it's the deeper, more meaningful things. But as soon as that click kind of takes place, it makes it so much easier to build actual relationships with people.
And not only does it help those relationships form, but it actually helps people respect you more. At least your target audience, right? In that moment, Jessie came to respect this leader more than she ever had before, because she was open, because she was real, and she wasn't putting on a front. Now, there are probably people who thought, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that is this what's happening over here behind this like perfect facade." And those are just not your people. Like, that's okay. Right. Like, if someone's going to judge you for being vulnerable and being yourself, like, that's not your person. I mean, ultimately, you want to be able to have a relationship, like an open, true, real friendship with your clients. And, you know, and if somebody is not open to that, then okay. Like, yeah. All right.
And part of that is the last piece here, which is to be open-minded. You know, people come from a lot of different backgrounds, and there are going to be connection points between you and your audience, but there are also going to be places that your audience members have been that feels completely alien to you and is not even close to your experience. But that's okay, because you still have those connection points, and you can use it as an opportunity to expand your own worldview, expand your own experiences, and to really learn more about yourself and your audience, and to become a better, you know, fill in the blank with whatever you do here, because it is those experiences. We're not all one dimensional. We don't all have those same exact experiences or the same exact journey. It's different flavors of similar journeys that we're experiencing.
Totally. Just sort of a micro story of my own. I grew up in the South in the US. It's like pretty straight-laced, and you know, if you are at all spiritual, you're probably like Protestant. And when I became an entrepreneur and started interacting with many more entrepreneurs, I started discovering that there's actually a lot of flavors of spirituality. I knew this, but I'd never really interacted with people who come from like wildly different backgrounds from me. And so what's amazing is when I opened up myself, and also I was around people who were very open about their beliefs and what was important to them, I was so much more able to form relationships. And now some of my very, very best friends in the industry are people who come from wildly different backgrounds from me, but we have so much in common that like, this is one of those things that just doesn't matter at all. And so it's been very rewarding to have those new experiences, those new relationships. And now it just seems like it's always been like such a non-issue. It's never been an issue, but it's like a different experience. And it's actually enriching and wonderful to have relationships with people who come from such different backgrounds. And that's really only possible because I've been open-minded, they've been open-minded, and we've all approached each other with respect.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, you know, the deeper you get into the journey that you're taking, the more you have those opportunities to grow. And that's just part of the process everyone takes. You know, when you first get into a new sphere, there are going to be a lot of things that are unfamiliar, and some of those things may be represented by your own audience members. So it actually is a really cool experience to have all of these different angles and all of these different ways that people, you know, their different timelines of life kind of connect to yours. And then you kind of take them on the journey so that they can get to this next stage that they're really looking for help with. So kind of as a quick recap, we talked about a bunch of different ways that you can be a really strong guide and mentor to your audience members. And so a few of the things we talked about was first finding out what kind of a guide you are. And we'll put the link to our copywriting character quiz in the show notes so that you can figure out what kind of guide you may kind of have hiding deep inside of you and not even realize is there, so you can embrace that voice within your content. We talked about telling micro stories from your own experience, so taking the big stories and breaking them down into smaller chunks. The importance of you language, even when telling your own story. So bringing the reader into it, bringing your audience member into it, whether you're doing written content or video, voice content, anything like that. Asking rhetorical questions, whether it's on static or dynamic content, so that you can get feedback and start collecting that data to find the next step, which is stories that are relatable. So you can prioritize those relatable stories. And then finally, being open-minded, because they may come from a different background, they may have different experiences, and that is not a bad thing. That actually enriches the entire process.
Exactly. So our challenge for you is to think about how you can embrace your inner Obi-Wan or whoever you decide to choose as your representation of a guide for your audience. And to take the copywriting character quiz if you haven't already, because that's a great way for you to launch into this process and to be really thinking about how you can be the guide to your audience rather than the hero of your own story. Step out of the spotlight, hand it to them, and watch the magic happen.
Absolutely. And if you take the quiz, please put your results in the comments below. We'd love to see what kind of a mix we have of different types of guides.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.